All right, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Robert. I will be your host, at least your co-host. And let's see, a little bit about me. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and they have a big Diego Rivera installation there. I began my career at the Detroit Institute of Arts after graduating with an art history degree from the University of Michigan. I'm currently joining you from Dallas, Texas, and we have our illustrious co-host joining us once again today, Patty. Hi, Patty. You want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yes, happy Sunday morning, everybody. Robert, we've got an interesting international audience here, so I don't want to take up too much time since we're a little late. I'm sure everybody's really excited to learn what you have to tell us about Diego Rivera.
Well, thank you. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks, Patty. Thanks for being here. So yes, let's go off to Mexico, at least in a virtual or online format, and talk about Diego Rivera. He was born in 1886. He passed away in 1957. And let's go ahead and talk about his art. Diego Rivera, most known for being the husband of Frida Kahlo, the great artist in her own right. But he also was a very significant artist and very talented, and both of them are among my favorite artists. And so I thought there was a big opportunity for people to learn more about Diego Rivera. I feel like the things that people know about him are, well, he was a Mexican artist, he was married to Frida Kahlo, and he cheated on her, but not really much beyond that. So let's talk about that. So we'll go through his life and career and artwork, and we'll do it in mostly a chronological format. Diego Rivera was born north of Mexico City, and as a young child, his family ended up moving to Mexico City. So he spent part of his childhood north of Mexico City, the rest of his childhood in Mexico City. And you can actually visit his birthplace in Mexico. You see a Casa Diego Rivera. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, just wanted to give you a heads up or familiarity with the fact that his birthplace is a popular museum in Mexico. It has the period furniture and a lot of artwork, and it also serves as a gallery. So you can add that to your list of things to go see and do in Mexico. And he decides at a very early age he wants to be an artist. And so look at this work that he did when he was 12 years old. It's a painting of a sculpture, a classical head. So look, he was born in 1886 and he did this one in 1898. This is the oldest surviving Diego Rivera painting, I believe. So only 12 years old. And then his early works are very kind of traditional. They feature a lot of Mexican themes and landscapes and stuff like this. I really like this painting a lot. It's really beautiful, kind of captures the essence of the natural beauty of Mexico. And then here's another one. This is A Morning in a Valley from 1908. So he's about 20 years old when he makes this one. And this, look at the beauty of that and how he captured the light. So very talented. And then here he is as a young man, a self-portrait. This is probably his most famous self-portrait. He did a few images of himself or a few depictions of himself. So he's a 23-year-old man at this point in time. Sitting there very casually with his pipe and his drink. Oops. Oh, I went too fast. There's a close-up and the full view. And then his style really changes. So look at this. Wow, that's very different than the other works that we've seen up until now. So he's 27 years old when he paints this. And why did his style change all of a sudden? Well, because he went to Europe. In particular, he went to Paris, and he ends up meeting a lot of modern artists, including Pablo Picasso, among others. And Picasso, of course, famous for getting the cubism style started. And so Rivera and Picasso actually become friends and spend a lot of time together. But it's not just him. Rivera is spending time with a lot of other very forward-thinking artist and trying new things. And he actually has a period in his career where he's a cubist artist. So look at this. This is a Diego Rivera painting from 1914. I am guessing that if the title or the artist's name wasn't shown and I asked people to identify who the artist might be for this one, that most people would not recognize this as a Diego Rivera painting. And then here's another one that's at the Art Institute Chicago. If you haven't been on one of our art programs before, I try and put where the painting is located at. So hopefully at some point in time you can go see it in person, the name of the artist, the years they were alive, the title of the work, and the year it was created. So this is at the Art Institute Chicago. And again, you wouldn't recognize this as a Rivera painting. A number of his works people probably could guess are Diego Rivera, but not so much all of them, especially some of these earlier ones. And then, so Rivera spends a number of years in Europe, mostly in Paris, but he does visit some other places. And then he does end up returning back to Mexico in 1920. And he makes a whole series of paintings really kind of documenting and celebrating Mexican history and culture. So let's go through and take a look at some of these. This is called Creation. This is one of his early murals that he did. Throughout his career, most of his significant works are either oil on canvas, or he did quite a few large mural projects, including this one. And there's a close-up again. This is called Creation. Most of the murals are in Mexico, as you can imagine. There's a few here in the United States that we'll take a look at. And again, the artwork of this particular time frame really focuses on the history and culture of Mexico. This is a portrait of two children. And some of the characteristics of Rivera's art, he uses a lot of vivid, bold colors. And then he also uses kind of what they call simplified forms. So like, for instance, take a look at this hat. It's got a beautiful yellow color, but there's not a lot of detail to it. I mean, it's plenty of detail for us to tell that it's a hat. But those are kind of two characteristics of his style. And then the subject matter is, again, oftentimes focusing on Mexican history and culture themes. And here is another well-known work. This is at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. This was during the American Revolution, and this gentleman was an agricultural worker that the government thought was a revolutionary. And so they stripped him, tied him up, and whipped him, and then left him for dead. And then the revolutionaries came along and rescued him. And so Rivera is depicting this. You can see the nude form, and then the blanket here. Some people have kind of compared this to like Christ with the shroud. And then you can see this guy here is cutting off the rope where his hands were bound, and all the whipping scarring on his back. Here's another work. This is called Sugarcane. And you have the overseer on horseback and the guy with the gun, kind of keeping everyone in line while all these people are doing work. And then you have the Caucasian sugar plantation owner sitting here idly on his hammock while other people do all the work. This is at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. This is Zapata. He was one of the key figures of the Mexican Revolution. This is a painting that is really fascinating because Zapata, when he was alive, he was a very flamboyant and colorful and charismatic figure. And usually when you see depictions of him, photographs, this is how he's shown. He's got this cool sombrero hat and the gun belt, and he's dressed up really nicely. So he just looks like a really cool macho guy, and again, very colorful and flamboyant and popular, etc., etc. The way De Rivera depicts him, though, is a little bit different. Over here, he depicts him as a man of the people. He's dressed in plain white clothes. These are the clothes of the sugarcane workers. He's actually even holding one of the implements that they'd use to cut the sugar cane, and he's leading the workers here. So these were the workers that rose up. This is one of the government soldiers. He's been killed. Zapata is stepping on his sword to kind of signify the fact that he's out of commission, and he's leading a white horse. A lot of symbolism in the white horse. So again, really kind of an interesting contrast in showing this great charismatic figure from how he was oftentimes depicted while he was alive. And then this painting was done after Zapata had died during the revolution. And we oftentimes talk about how artwork kind of documents what's going on or is influenced by popular history and popular culture, but sometimes art influences popular and history and culture in the other direction. Like, for instance, maybe this type of painting goes to kind of shape people's memory or perceptions of Zapata, which is exactly what Rivera was hoping for. He was a big admirer of him. And this painting is from 1936 at the Art Institute Chicago. It's called Weaving. And this was a very famous woman in Mexican history. She began her career as a model, and then she transitioned into an artist, and she was also a teacher. And so this is actually a real person that Rivera was familiar with. Here she is modeling for some artists in Mexico. And then later on, she became a famous weaver. This is not her in the photo. This is a much, much later photo. I just included this so that you can see what she's doing. So this was a loom that would be attached to the artist's back. And then the string over here kind of keeps it upright, kind of the same thing that she's doing. And then you go in and you can make the weaving items. And then here was a great quote from the Art Institute Chicago. Diego Rivera promoted a vision of Mexican national identity rooted in indigenous and folk cultures, distinct from the legacies of Spanish colonialism. So this is really an important point. Rivera was very proud of his Mexican heritage, very proud of Mexican history. And during the revolution, they're really kind of breaking with a lot of the structures and ideas of Spanish colonialism, and embracing a lot of these indigenous folk type cultures. And so you can see Rivera in some of these paintings. That's exactly what he's doing. He's really kind of promoting this idea of Mexico's importance and independence, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, sorry, if I said American Revolution, I meant Mexican Revolution. Sorry about that. Here's Indian Woman Spinning from 1936. Some of these paintings we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about. We will focus on a handful, but I kind of just wanted you to, some of these just to kind of see in person. So this is a portrait of a friend of his and her daughter. And then look at the beautiful colors on this painting. And then he nicely captures their smiles. I don't know of any artist that uses the full spectrum of colors the way Rivera does. Like Vincent van Gogh is known for his colors, but Rivera also really awesome palette. This is a dance from 1935. This was actually the first Diego Rivera painting I ever saw in my life, so a sentimental favorite. And then here's Woman Seated with Flowers. Oh, here's something I have to share. So thanks for the heads up. or the reminder, there's a big Diego Rivera exhibit currently taking place in San Francisco, and I posted the link for that in the chat. One of the things that Rivera was known for was his portraits of women, particularly young, beautiful women, and he really had a knack for making them look spectacular. So, like, look at this painting. It's really kind of a classic Rivera work. It's a woman. She's beautifully portrayed. It's got the great colors. The forms are somewhat simplified. He's got the flowers in the background, so just really a spectacular portrait by him. And then this is a mural that he did. This actually has Frida Kahlo making an appearance in it right here. This is called The Ballad of the Revolution. All right, let's talk about his flower series. So a lot of artists are known for a particular subject. So, like, for instance, Frida Kahlo is known for her self-portraits. Monet is known for his water lilies. Georgia O'Keeffe, known for her flowers or scenes of New Mexico. And Rivera, this is probably his probably his three most well-known types of works are women, the flower series, which we're going to look at now, and then some of the murals, which we'll look more at a little bit later. So here's some examples of these, and you can kind of see with these a lot of similarities, but you can also see quite a few differences. Again, notice the beautiful colors. He's really kind of embracing the cultural heritage of Mexico with the flowers, which especially the calla lilies play an important part in their culture, the simplified forms, et cetera, et cetera. If you look at these and you're kind of noticing or looking for patterns or trends, it's always helpful to look at art kind of like this when you're looking at more than one work and kind of see what's going on. So this is a great example because notice these two paintings have multiple figures in them. And then you go to these two, which are done later, and there's just two figures. And then these ones, which were done last, there's only one figure. So, and you see this all the time in art. We saw this yesterday when we were looking at the Barnes collection. Usually in art, not always, but usually if there's a series of works, the number of figures is reduced over time. And so here's a classic example. These were done first, these were done a little bit later, and then these were done last. And the reason why artists do that is, they start out kind of ambitious, but then over time, they really want your eye to focus on particular things. And they usually end up making the works a little bit less busy. Not that these aren't spectacular paintings, but they're just a little bit different. So this is at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. This is called Flower Day or Flower Festival. One of the challenges with Rivera's works is sometimes the titles are called different things. So if you're trying to like find one on Google or something like that, you might have to do a little bit of kind of playing around with the title. And you have a woman here in a flower market. This is almost people have kind of thought that, wow, this looks like a religious painting, like these people are praying to a god or something like that. And then look at the feet, how he depicts them, and then the contrast between the darker colors and the lighter colors. So he really does a great job with color of using complementary colors and also contrasting colors. Hold on for just 1 second. Here is another one. This is the flower carrier from the San Francisco Museum of Art. And then again, the beautiful color. So this is an interesting painting in the sense of the kind of hidden meaning to it. You know, we tend to think of flowers, these very beautiful objects, and we just go to the store and buy them. It's very simple, or that we receive them as gifts. But you know, there's a lot of hard work involved in the production of flowers and getting them to market and stuff like that. And so that's what this is really showing here, kind of the work involved in getting the flowers to the consumer. And so you can see this man here. So he's on his hands and knees, and he has this strap that's holding this heavy burden or basket of flowers in place. And then here's a woman, guessing maybe this is his wife, perhaps, and she's assisting in that endeavor. And then here's the beautiful flowers. And look at those colors. And then the full thing. So again, kind of this contrast between the beauty of the flowers and the hard physical manual labor that's involved in bringing them to us. Here's kind of a similar type of subject matter. And here's another example that I was talking about. This is called The Flower Vendor or The Flower Seller from 1942. And you can see this time it's the woman who's on her knees, and she's getting ready to take the basket of the heavy flowers. So again, look at the beauty of the calla lily flowers. And then you have this figure in the background who's assisting her. Oh yeah, Joe brings up a good point. Yeah, the details of the baskets even very specifically done. Here's another one, The Flower Seller. This is at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And this is at a bank in Mexico City. This is the calla lily vendor from 1942. And again, look at those spectacular colors. It's really amazing. And his kind of characteristic feet here. He does numerous depictions like that. And then this is in a private collection. A number of Rivera works are in private collection. If you're kind of wondering why perhaps maybe you haven't seen some of these paintings, it's because a lot of them are owned by individuals, particularly in Mexico, and they don't maybe travel as often as paintings that are in museums that go on temporary exhibits. They're usually not featured as often in books and magazine articles and calendars and stuff like that. So that's kind of one of the challenges of studying Rivera's work, is a number of the paintings are owned in private collections. If there's a painting that's, say, at the Art Institute of Chicago and one that's in the private collection, the Art Institute of Chicago one, of course, is going to get a lot more publicity and media coverage and stuff like that. So what I thought I would do is, why don't we take a quick time out and kind of check in with Patty and everyone else in the audience and kind of see what your thoughts are on these paintings. It's always really interesting to see what others think about art. You know, when you go to an art museum with someone, you kind of compare notes on the different works. So why don't we do that for a little bit? We'll take a quick break. And so kind of when you look at these paintings, what kind of pops out for you? Any particular thing that you see or notice, anything that surprises you or intrigues you, et cetera, et cetera. So Patty, anything jump out at you when you're looking at these?
Well, Hazel is asking, does the fact that white calla lilies are associated with the Virgin Mary have any significance in these paintings?
Know that I'm not sure of. I'm not actually an expert on that particular subject, but that's a good question.
Well, I had noticed before, I mean, one of the things I really enjoy about his, more mature art that we're looking at now is the way in which he blends Mexican folk tradition with colonial themes and with Catholic Christian themes. And he does that throughout a number of his paintings. It depends on how familiar you might be with some of the symbolism, but I think she's probably on to something, because Kayla lilies are called peace lilies as well. I don't know
Mhm.
that it's just a Catholic thing, but yeah, she's right. Oftentimes there is an association with the Virgin Mary. So I think that's part of his total Mexican sensibility, which does include Catholicism.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely does. MC brought up a good point. Said the nude is very different than the other paintings. Yeah, that's a good observation. He actually did a number of nudes that are kind of sort of similar to this. For just for the sake of time, we're not really getting into that category. But yeah, I was kind of torn with whether or not I should include it in this section or put it in a separate section. But yeah, it does look a little bit different, although it does still kind of feature the flowers, so to speak.
Well, and then Kim is saying, interesting that religion's themes are so important, but he was an atheist. I believe he was a communist, and officially, I think communism advocates or denies an existence of a God. But I think part of what makes Rivera so interesting is that he melds all of this stuff together. That's what's so folk about his folk art, right? That
Hmm.
he's looking at everything that is affecting the Mexican people.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
mean, there's a number of artists over time that have been atheists, but they still do works of with religious themes or something like that. Because like a lot of people see kind of religion in this painting, even though it's not a religious painting per se, because you have these, they almost look like they're worshipers in front of the altar, so to speak.
yeah, like I said, it's the sum total of what it means to Rivera to represent Mexicanism. And I think a great deal of his interest in communism had to do with how to improve or evolve conditions in Mexico for all people.
Hmm.
So I definitely think that, what some of these people are seeing is very essential. Somebody's pointing out lilies for funerals. And also, if you think of Mexican tradition and history, the Day of the Dead is a huge day of celebration, which coincides with All Souls Day. So again, there's that folk and religious combination. Yeah, okay. And me is saying calla lilies in Mexico are associated with death and funerals. So yeah, these are all wrapping together in that way. And I think that people are picking, or the people that are watching and conversing here are picking up those themes. So let's see, composition
Oh
improved.
yeah, here's a great comment from Sue. She says, "Is if he's not religious, is it to sell the paintings?" Yeah. So Mexico is a Catholic country, and so people probably would have seen kind of the religious symbolism in this, or maybe like even the comparison. And then when you look at art, you can kind of see whatever you want to see. So if you're not religious, you probably wouldn't see any religion in this painting, perhaps. But if you are, you'd be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of like people at the altar." So yeah, he's probably is kind of thinking about that because let's face it, he has to sell his artwork. So that was a
Right,
really
but important to remember too that the colonialism and the Catholicism are completely bound up with each other. So there's a lot of themes in these paintings, and I think you can look at any one of them for a long time and see, um, more. And he's not necessarily putting negative or positive. He's giving you like this is what is here, and what do you want to do with it? I think.
Mhm. Yeah, just the colors is really so spectacular in his works. Really, really amazing.
And the colors are very traditionally Mexican, I believe.
Yeah, there's a lot of lighter colors. If you Hispanic and Latino, the culture is usually brighter colors. I mean, they're further south than the United States, and so you just kind of see things like that you maybe not necessarily see in the United States.
Yeah, Christine is mentioning the bent stances, and some of them represent the backbreaking work and burdens of the working class, which
Mhm.
again is all bound up in that colonial history, a very great deal. So people are definitely seeing what Rivera had to say, which is, um, yeah, I mean, some artists that we look at, there are so many different ways of interpreting them, and one great thing about this program is that by seeing what he was, what his abilities were, especially like with the works in France and the early self-portrait, it helps you to really appreciate this work that he did more in his maturity, because his own views and politics, he made a choice to come down on a particular theme, I think.
Oh yeah, when you look at these, you can really kind of, like we said before, you can kind of see whatever you want to see. Like this painting in particular, some people kind of note the sexual kind of hints that he's referring to, and then, you know, religion and the socioeconomic condition of the workers and politics and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it really is kind of um, there's just gives you the opportunity to really kind of see whatever you want to see in some of these. So let's see, anything else pops out from anybody before we move on?
Yeah, Howard is saying that he thinks the people seem weighed down by the flowers, which he identifies as a communist viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. I think it's evenly divided. Some of them seem to be truly embracing the flowers. Other people do seem to be laboring with the flowers. So, you know, I
Probably kind
think,
of both. I mean, people like flowers and they're beautiful, but yeah, I mean, you think about it, the flowers are oftentimes purchased by the bourgeoisie, and you have these workers that probably aren't making a lot of money that are producing them or selling them and things like that. So it's really kind of maybe like that paradox between the, you know, the beauty of the flower and the kind of work involved.
yeah, the ones on the bottom row, they all seem to be embracing the flowers.
Mhm. Yeah, and maybe that's just because he was kind of shifting his thought process, so to speak. Because yeah, you don't see the burden as much as he moves on. So, all right, well, that was awesome. Let's continue on and go look at some more of his artwork. We'll talk about some of his paintings a little bit later again. So thanks, Patty. Thanks, everyone. So we didn't have time to really go over every single flower painting that he made, but just here's a few more examples, just to give you a sense of some of the other works in the flower series that he did. All right, let's talk about Frida Kahlo and their relationship. Frida Kahlo, of course, great artist in her own right. And most people, when they think about Diego Rivera, they might kind of reference the Alfred Molina character that was in the Frida film. And I thought he really did a good job of kind of giving you the essence of Diego Rivera. He was very talented. He had his shortcomings in, say, saying faithful in the marriage, but just very talented artist. He was very charismatic, and people were drawn to him, and et cetera, et cetera. Frida was a talented artist even before she met Diego Rivera. So they got together in 1928, and you can see she made this self-portrait in 1926. So this is Frida Kahlo self-portrait in a velvet dress from 1926. This was 2 years before she met Diego Rivera, just so you don't think that, like, oh, she wasn't a talented artist until she met him. No, she was talented on her own. And there was a little bit of an age difference between the two of them. So Rivera was born in 1886, and Frida Kahlo was born in 1907. He was 21 years her senior. That being said, he outlived her by 3 years. She passed away in 1954, and he died in 1957. Just give you that context. And then everyone likes to look at wedding pictures. So here is the wedding of Frida and Diego. They were married on August 21st, 1929. And they were married for 25 years until Frida died. So black and white photo. This was a lot of old photos that you see that are color have been colorized in modern times, but this one was actually hand tinted shortly after it was made, and so it really has a lot of beautiful colors capturing their wedding. So there's the black and white photo, and there's the color tinted one. And oh, you know, Patty, you'll have to put yourself on mute because your keyboard, if you don't mind. And then this is at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. This is Frida and Diego. So Frida actually did this as a wedding, but you can unmute yourself, of course, if you chime in with anything. But this is actually a wedding portrait that Frida did, a painting that she did for her and Diego. This is a portrait that Frida did of Diego. He, at this point in time, had gotten really sick and had been in the hospital and lost a lot of weight. And so she was happy to have him back home. And so she did this portrait of him. And then you kind of have to wonder the impact that their relationship and marriage had on their artistic endeavors. They were both very talented. I mean, think about it. Frida Kahlo was a talented artist before she met him. He was a talented artist before he met her. But when the two of them get together, it can't help but have this great artist looking over your shoulder, so to speak. So here he is, and he's looking over her shoulder as she's making one of her self-portraits. And then here he is, he's in Detroit making some notes and sketches for a work that he was commissioned to. You can see her looking very attentively over his shoulder. So they no doubt would have had the benefit of that situation. And then just some more photos. A lot of people make when I've talked to people in person about Diego Rivera, they have a lot of kind of very negative opinions of him because, oh, he cheated on Frida and he was unfaithful and terrible and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that's not warranted, but people kind of focus on that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And they had a very interesting, quote unquote, relationship marital wise. They both had affairs. And so just, I don't know, it's I guess what I'm trying to say, it's a complex situation. I don't want to focus too much on the marital stuff just because I'm kind of focused more on his artwork. And we'll leave it at that. And if you want to learn more about Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, one of the great places to go is to Mexico City to see Frida's Casa Azul Museum. And they were married in 1929. Frida and Diego, and they were together until she died in 1954. So 25 years they were together. We actually have a whole separate program on Frida Kahlo's Casa Azul, the Blue House, down in Mexico City, so you can join us for that. It's not on our calendar. I'm not sure when we'll be doing it again because we have other programs that we have to rotate through. But if you want to learn more about Frida and the Blue House, you can join us for our Casa Azul live stream tour, which we'll have it again at some point in time. Okay, in 1930, the Riveras, Diego and Frida, go to the United States. And I think some people might not realize they actually spent quite a few years living and working in the United States. So let's talk about that. This is at the Baltimore Museum of Art. Here's a self-portrait that Rivera did in 1930, to give you a sense of what he looked like around the time he came to the US. And then this is a caption from the Museum of Modern Art that I thought really kind of summarized this phase of his life and career. By 1930, artists and audiences in the United States were particularly receptive of Diego Rivera's work and ideas. He began traveling north of Mexico's borders with his wife, the painter Frida Kahlo, in 1930, and over the next 5 years completed major mural cycles in San Francisco, Detroit, and New York, becoming a true international celebrity. In 1931, he was invited to mount a retrospective exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, then just 2 years old. If you are in the United States, you're going to be visiting and want to see Rivera's works, probably the three best places to do it is San Francisco, Detroit, and New York. All of those three places have a fair number of works of Rivera's. Most of the works, the best place to go see his work is in Mexico, but if you can't make it down there, you can go check it out in person in San Francisco, Detroit, and New York. So he goes to San Francisco first, and he ends up making this beautiful mural or fresco, which went too fast. The making of a fresco showing the building of a city from 1931. This is at the San Francisco Art Institute. And this is the style of work that Rivera is known for. He's very talented oil painter. Most of the works that I've been showing you up until now have been oil paintings, but he's also known for these murals, or sometimes people call them frescoes. And so here's a classic example. This is one in San Francisco. And look at the beautiful light coming down on the mural. And then here's the depiction over here. So this is, in essence, San Francisco being built up after the earthquake and various other things. And so we look at the size of this, and then it's even got the scaffolding included in here just to give you kind of the full effect. So if you're wondering what that is, and then but you can see the door here and how large it is compared to the door. So I mean, this is really large scale objects. And let's face it, not a lot of artists do stuff like this. These big mural projects, particularly now, you don't really see this as often, particularly with a lot of detail. And then these were some works he did in New York City. We already saw these two works, but this was part of a show that he did at the Museum of Modern Art. So 2 years after the MoMA opened, they invited Rivera there to do a retrospective of his art, which was a very impressive feat because he was just the second artist featured at the MoMA. The first was Matisse, so that's very select company. And when they go to New York, Diego and Frida are very popular. During their lifetime, he was the famous artist. She was not, you might be surprised to know, she was not really all that well known while she was alive. She was known in artistic circles and in Mexico City where they were living. But outside of that, she was not, and she was known quite a bit in New York City and places like that. But just if you were to walk up to 100 random people on the street somewhere and ask them who Frida Kahlo was, they wouldn't know who you're talking about. Her fame came later after she died, unfortunately, maybe kind of sort of like Vincent van Gogh. And although when he was alive, he was a famous artist. And so he was kind of the toast of the town in New York City, and he's getting invited to all these parties and people are fawning over them, et cetera, et cetera. And then he does this interesting painting of New York City. This, by the way, the Dolores Olmedo collection or museum in Mexico City. This has the world's largest collection of Rivera's works. So if you want to see his things, you can go down and visit that, and then go to the Casa Azul and to his birthplace, et cetera, et cetera. But this is an interesting triptych type painting of New York City. Up here on the top, you have all the distinctive tall buildings of New York City. And then down here, this is a bank or a financial institution. And so you can see here the gate basically keeping all the money safe. And these are customers of the bank. Here's one of the bankers. But then over here, the center part, look at the date for this. It's 1931. So this is during the Great Depression. And this is a homeless shelter. And so he's showing all these people that have taken refuge in this place. And they're all kind of crammed in here to keep warm and get a night's sleep. And so he's contrasting the fact that New York City, it's one of the world's largest cities. There's a lot of wealth, these big giant buildings, there's banks and financial institutions and Wall Street. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have all these homeless people, which is a situation which continues into today. And then he goes off to Detroit and creates perhaps his most well-known work that's here in the United States. This is called the Detroit Industry Murals. This is from 1933. So these are actually two different pictures. This mural project is it takes up a whole entire room, and it's actually kind of hard to fully appreciate on like a Zoom type broadcast. But this is one wall of the room, and then this is the opposite room of the wall. So this is two of the four rooms. And needless to say, I, of course, did not take these two photos myself. So here's the one wall. And look at the size of this project. So here's a doorway. And then here's the mural. And so this is the main section of it. But it has all these other kind of supporting or auxiliary components as well. Up here, he's got kind of indigenous Mexican figures representing the earth and creation and stuff like that. The centerpiece, though, is this section here. And then here's the companion piece, again, with the indigenous figures and the workers. What he's trying to represent here is, okay, there's indigenous workers and creation, and then there's the raw materials, and then people work to actually in a factory to make cars. So this was in Detroit, which is the home of the automotive industry. And this is actually at the Detroit Institute of Arts, my former employer. And he got commissioned by Edsel Ford to come to Detroit and do a large scale mural project in this room that would kind of highlight the automotive industry in Detroit. Here's another view. So these are the long walls on the side, and this is the shorter wall. And this is the main entryway of the museum back here. So you walk up these stairs and you come in here and wow. So if you ever get a chance, you really got to see this in person. The pictures, while they look nice, they just don't do it justice. I've been in this room dozens and dozens and dozens of time. I used to have to cut through here it was a long story. When I used to work at the museum, where I worked was on one side of the museum and where my boss worked was on the other side. And so I had to walk through the museum several times a day to go see her. And I usually tried to cut through here and then just visiting on my own and just never get tired of looking at this. It's just incredibly amazing and spectacular. Words can't describe it to a certain degree. And then again, look at the size of it compared to these people. So again, this is at the Detroit Institute of Arts. This is the gentleman who commissioned Rivera. This is Edsel Ford. He was the son of Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company, the guy who got the Model T going. And this is the Rouge factory in Detroit. So this is probably the most famous factory in the world. It's certainly the most famous automotive factory, and it's in Dearborn, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit. It's massive in scale. During its peak, 100,000 people worked in this factory. It was really a marvel of modern engineering. How this works is these raw materials would come in, usually by ship. So all different types of things they would need to build a car. And then it goes through the production process here, and they would convert the raw materials that came in the plant at one end, and then at the other end, the finished automobiles would roll off the assembly line. So it was a complete process. Here's a picture of the assembly line. And again, this is called the Rouge plant. Frida is accompanying him during this time. And, it's funny, people think their marriage was bad because of all the infidelity, but in my opinion, there was a lot of passion and love in this relationship, regardless of what your thoughts are on the infidelity situation. So, like, for instance, if you ever Google Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera kissing or embracing or something like that, there's just all these pictures of them. And, they're not newlyweds when these pictures were taken. And these are just a couple examples. They had been married for a few years by the time this is taking place. And then I wanted to show you a short video clip of the murals. So bear with me for one moment. Let me make sure I got this set up. And this is actually one of my former coworkers who's narrating this. So let's see what Pam to say.
We're at the Detroit Institute of Arts in Rivera Court, which is where Diego Rivera's world-renowned Detroit Industry Murals are. It's the heart of the museum. We're very proud of this, and it inspires artists from Detroit and around the world. Rivera came here in the early 1930s, and the only requirement was that it was about Detroit and Detroit's industry. So he went to the Ford River Rouge plant, which is a suburb of Detroit, and he was fascinated. He was fascinated by the machinery, by the rhythm, but what he also did was put a lot of his own views in. The men on the line were all ethnicities and races, according to Rivera, but in reality it wasn't like that at all. He was commissioned actually by Edsel Ford, who was a modern art collector. And needless to say, Henry Ford, his father, was not very happy because he was pretty conservative. If you look on this wall, you see a man with a ruler, and he's a composite of Henry Ford and Thomas Edison. So he symbolizes the man who is stern and always listening and watching. Also on that wall, you have warplanes that were used for destruction, poison gas manufacture that mutated cells. Then on the other side, you have the worker, who just happens to have a red star on his glove and a hammer in his hand. So the dichotomy of industry being good and evil is here. You see a group of people who are being given a tour of the plant, so they're watching the workers. And Rivera thought, oh, this is the bourgeoisie, they don't have to work, they have all this leisure time. So he patterned some of them after comic book characters. So you'll see Dick Tracy, you'll see the Katzenjammer Kids, and then Charlie Chan. So in his own way, he's making fun of them. And then on this wall, he considered agriculture the first industry. So he has a baby being born out of the earth. And then on either side, he has fruits and vegetables that are native to Michigan. So everything really comes out of the earth. And there was a right-wing priest, Father Conklin, who had a radio show that called for the murals to be whitewashed because he said that was blasphemous and he thought the nudity was pornographic. But actually, the administration of the museum and Edsel Ford and the workers all rallied behind it. So we're very fortunate that this, which really is his best work, remains the heart of the DIA and a wonderful symbol for Detroit.
All right, so wanted to show you that video just so you can get more of kind of a 3D view of that. And he didn't just start painting on the wall, he made a number of sketches and drawings in preparation. So here's an example of that. And so you can see the drawing ends up becoming the mural. And so it's really highlighting, again, the workers on the line that are doing this manual labor and putting the cars together. Again, maybe kind of similar to the flowers in the sense that, you know, we just go to the store and buy the flowers. We just go to the car dealership and buy the car, but maybe not fully appreciating all the hard manual work and the production process that required in building an automobile. If you go to Detroit, you can go on a tour of the Rouge plant. It's really fascinating to see how these cars are assembled. So make sure you do that. And one of the things that's amazing about this artwork is, number one, the scale. It's so large. But on the other hand, it's filled with all kinds of intricate details. So look at all these little specific details on the workers with the glasses and the mustaches and the clothes and the hats and the muscles and all the little aspects of the machines that they're working on. Just amazing. And here's another view. Here's the overseer kind of keeping tabs on things. And this is what Pam was referring to, where, yeah, you can go on tours of the factory, and just Rivera just thought that was so bourgeoisie that these people would have leisure time and that they would spend their leisure time going to see workers working. He just thought that was really unusual, but that's the way it is. And again, all the intricate detail. This is a Time magazine profile of Diego Rivera. So again, they're not a, if you look at the history of Time magazine, they've had a few artists on the cover, not a lot. So quite an impressive distinction that he is one of the few that's made the cover of Time magazine. So I wanted to show this to you just kind of so you can have a sense of his popularity. He was a well-known guy when he was alive. He was probably, I'd probably have to say, while he was alive, he was one of the most famous artists, living artists in the world. And his fame, while he's still a well-known artist, he's really been eclipsed by Frida. She's really surpassed him in the fame department, so to speak, for whatever that's worth. So then after the Detroit project, he gets invited to come back to New York City and do a mural for the Rockefeller Center. So here's a vintage postcard. Rockefeller Center, one of the most important buildings in New York City. And this is the work that he made there, although this is a copy of it because the one that he did was destroyed. We'll go through that story in just a minute. This was called Man at the Crossroads, or sometimes it's called Man, the Controller of the Universe. And here it is. So he gets commissioned to do this at Rockefeller Center. He submitted some preliminary sketches and drawings showing what his vision was. And then when he goes to do the actual painted work, he has a little bit of a change of thought, and he decides to include Lenin in the work, which that was not in the proposals that he submitted to the Rockefellers. They took offense of that, kind of similar to the Fords in Detroit with some of the stuff there. And so there's this debate on what's going to happen. And the Rockefellers want Rivera to take that out. He says, no, that would compromise my artistic vision. There's not really any kind of happy medium. So what they end up doing is they pay him his full commission. And then as soon as he gets the money, they tear the whole work down. So they destroyed it. And it's very controversial even to this day. I can kind of see both sides of the story, to be honest with you. But some people have very strong opinions one way or the other, which is fine. But suffice to say, this work did not survive. Now, he had still the drawings and the sketches, and then he had also taken photographs of this work while it was being created. So he then goes back to Mexico and recreates it down there. So this is not the Rockefeller commission per se exactly, but it's pretty much a realistic or a good copy of it, revised and enhanced, new and improved version down in Mexico. And then you can see Lenin here. And of course, we talked before, Rivera had communist sympathies. It's really amazing. And so this is what the Rockefeller Center looks like now. It's amazing to talk to people or listen to people, and they dismiss Rivera's talent as an artist because he was a communist. Oh yeah, that guy was terrible. He was a communist, blah. Which, is fine. I don't like communism at all, but I can still appreciate his talent as an artist. And then here's the work now that's at the Rockefeller Center. It's by a Spanish artist, I think. And it's not bad. It's just not as cool as Rivera's, in my opinion. And then here's another big mural project he did. This is at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. This is called Pan-American Unity from 1940. This is a really large scale work, and he actually includes Frida Kahlo in this one. So this was in 1940. He actually went back to Mexico in 1935 with Frida. They were there for several years, and then he came back to the United States in 1940 to do this work. This one is really large scale as well. So again, look at the size of this in comparison to the people. So this is the entryway into the museum. Here's another view. So you can just sit here and kind of stare. And then again, on the one hand, really large scale object, really monumental and massive and impressive. On the other hand, just an incredible amount of intricate detail on these. Here's another view. So look at the size of this person compared to the overall work. And then here's Frida. I have a short video for this one also, and then we'll show you some close-ups of the mural.
Mexican artist Diego Rivera painted masterpieces that inspire and symbolize both struggle and unity as we celebrate Latino culture this month. KTVU's Brooks DeRose has a look at Rivera's last mural in the U.S. created on Treasure Island during World War II.
At SF MoMA, you can't miss it. A mural standing 22 feet high, spanning 74 feet wide, and weighing 30 tons.
So what you're seeing up here is an extemporaneous on-site invention. He invented this in 7 weeks.
He is Diego Rivera, a Mexican-born artist with a passion for politics and his heritage.
And he made socially engaged murals, so murals that showed social and political struggles of the places he was in.
This work is Pan-American Unity, created in 1940, headlining the Golden Gate International Exposition, Art in Action.
So he actually painted the mural on Treasure Island in front of a live audience and with the help of local artists and assistants here from San Francisco.
He probably was very close to the same technique somebody like Michelangelo. used in the Sistine Chapel.
Working on a scaffold in an airplane hangar, Rivera depicts cultural creators, from artisans to architects and inventors, those who've shaped North American society.
The mural centers San Francisco as this place where cultures meet, where Mexico and the U.S. comes together.
But drawing on his experiences, his focus was also bigger than this continent.
Diego came here with a very specific agenda, and it's right over here. He's trying to get the U.S. into the war against the Nazis.
One of the 10 panels, a warning over fascism and dictators like Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin, surrounded by an appeal to overcome differences, using his education, experience, and background to celebrate what unites us.
And he has a really good quote that I love. He's talking about sinking his hands into the dough of his own country. So now he's going to take these technological skills and sing the song of Mexico.
This is the result, the marriage of artistic expression of the North and of the South on this continent. Pan-American unity, right in our backyard some 80 years later. Diego Rivera, a man of unique style, perspective, and influence, bridging barriers while leaving behind a legacy. In San Francisco, Brooks Jarose, KTVU, Fox 2 News.
So the work at the Rockefeller Center was destroyed. The mural at Detroit still exists, although there's a lot of Rivera artwork in museums in New York City, which is one reason why it's good to visit there. The Detroit mural still exists. The Detroit mural, I forgot to mention, that took 11 months for him to complete that. Usually these large-scale mural installations, he was working with assistants. It was his vision, and he's doing most of the finish work. They would kind of help with kind of the prep work and et cetera, et cetera. And then let's see, also, so one of the clashes that Frida and Diego had during their marriages, he actually was intrigued by the United States, even though he was a communist. He liked the hustle and bustle and, you know, all the action that was taking place, and people were fawning on him. I mean, he was kind of concerned about the economic disparity and some of the other kind of like social, economic, political issues. But by and large, he actually had a lot of favorable thoughts of the United States. Frida Kahlo, not so much. She thought the people here were very fake and shallow and superficial and phony and kind of stuff like that, just to maybe kind of paraphrase her thoughts. So that ends up causing a lot of clash, because he wants to be in the United States to do these works, and she's like, no, let's just go back to Mexico and stay there. So let me do this. Let me show you sections of the mural just so you can see some of the details, because it is so large, it's hard to kind of fully grasp it. Again, the title is Pan-American Unity. He's showing the unity, of course, throughout the Western Hemisphere. So this is the entire left third of the panel, or the installation. And you can see here it has a lot of indigenous figures, people working on different things. Here's the top left section. Got bridges and the tall buildings, New York City. Here's the bottom left section. Remember, we saw this figure earlier, or very similar figure, holding the loom. And then this is the middle third. So you have, you know, the section over here we just saw, and there's another section over here we'll see in a minute. So this is the middle third. Here's Frida down here. Here's George Washington and Abe Lincoln and John Brown. We'll see them in a minute. And then this is the top section of the middle portion of the work. Here's the bottom section. Again, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, John Brown, Frida Kahlo. One of the things with Diego and Frida, they were very knowledgeable about history. They read a lot. They stayed up on current affairs. They really knew a lot about what was going on and historical events and concepts and people and things like that. And then this is the far right third. Here's the top section. You have California with power lines and the redwoods, and look, you have the covered wagons and people working. And then as the narrator mentioned, Hitler. So at this point in time, 1940, the United States had not gotten involved in the war in Europe just yet. And the full view. All right, let's talk about Rivera's mature years. So pretty much the last, say, 20 years of his life. Here's a self-portraited Smith College Museum of Art in Massachusetts. So he did a lot of portraits of women. He periodically would do portraits of men. This is an interesting one for those of you that live in Washington, D.C. Chester Dale is not a household name, but if I'm not mistaken, he's the person who donated the second most amount of artworks to the National Gallery of Art. The Chester Dale collection has just dozens and dozens and dozens of iconic artworks at the National Gallery of Art, and they were owned by Chester Dale. He thankfully donated them to the museum in Washington, D.C., and so they're on display. And so Rivera does his portrait. So he didn't always paint women, although he tended to focus on that. Here's Chester Dale. He's looking at an art book, and you might be able to recognize that's Vincent van Gogh. And then this was his wife before Frida. This is Guadalupe Medin from 1938. This is a really beautiful portrait of her. And then here's a quick bio on her. Guadalupe Marin, or Lupe, was a Mexican model and novelist. She was married to Diego Rivera from 1922 to 1928 and was the mother of two of his children, Guadalupe and Ruth. So there she is with the two children. Oops, let me go back. I went too fast. So he painted her 10 years after they were divorced. But just a really beautiful portrait of her. And then interestingly enough, Frida Kahlo also did a portrait of Lupe. So imagine doing a portrait of your husband's ex-wife. That's what happened here. And there's the two portraits side by side. So here's Frida's on the left, and then here's Diego's on the right. And then here is one of his daughters, Ruth. She was an important figure in Mexico. She was an artist in her own right, and she was also a well-known architect and later an arts administrator, and I think she also was a writer. Ruth Rivera, architect, writer, teacher. Her father was Diego Rivera. Her mother was Guadalupe Medin. And here's Rivera with his daughter. And here he is, work in progress. And then in addition to the flowers and the murals, which aren't really like a subject matter, their murals are more of like a process. His paintings of women are what he's known for. He just did all these depictions of these beautiful women. Here's three examples here. That was 5 examples, and then 3 more here. So we'll do the same thing we did with the flowers. I'll walk through and kind of explain these to you kind of at a high level and give you some kind of historical context. But then we'll open it up and see what you think about these paintings, if any particular ones pop out and get your attention. So let's look at these. So these 5 vertical ones and these 3 horizontal ones. So this is Dolores del Rio from 1938. Again, we're talking about the last 20 years of Rivera's life and career. She was a famous actress If you're in Southern California or ever been there, there's the famous play of Ramona. And then you can see she was in, here she is, Dolores Del Rio, co-starring with Henry Fonda in The Fugitive. And so here are pictures of her photographs. And it's always interesting because sometimes, depending on what time frame we're talking about in art, you're like, how come photographs didn't replace portrait painting? Well, because they're kind of two different things. So like, yeah, these are really nice. I like these pictures a lot, but I also like this painted portrait. So it's really just kind of a, I mean, they're both similar photography and painted portraits, and they're capturing the essence of a person, but they've kind of got their own strengths and weaknesses, so to speak. And so just a really beautiful portrait of her, the colors and even her nails, the bright red. And then he puts her name up here in the ribbon, Dolores. Yeah, Patty says he definitely doesn't seem conflicted on his views of women. Yeah, he liked women a lot, Diego Rivera did. And you can get a sense of that in these portraits. I mean, he makes these women, the women were beautiful, and he makes them even more so, if that's possible. So here's another portrait, Natasha Gelman from 1943. And just, wow, look at that, really spectacular. She's in this kind of form-fitting white dress and laying on this couch here. We'll look at the beautiful calla lilies in the background. One thing about Rivera that's noteworthy is he oftentimes spends a lot of time, or a fair amount of time, giving detail to women's shoes. That's really interesting for a male artist. You don't really see that very often, that kind of attention to detail. It kind of reminds me to a certain degree of Renoir. Renoir's father was a tailor, and Renoir's mother was a dressmaker. So his paintings oftentimes have a lot of attention on fashion and things like that. And kind of a similar with Rivera, would have been easy to kind of, simplify this, but he didn't. So again, really beautiful, elegant portrait. And then this is a actress, Linda Christian, from 1947. Some of these people that he did portraits of, maybe not names that might be familiar with today. So Linda Christian was a Mexican film actress who appeared in Mexican and Hollywood films. Her career reached its peak in the 1940s and 1950s. She is noted for being the first Bond girl, as in James Bond. Valerie Mathis, appearing in a 1954 television adaptation of the James Bond novel Casino Royale. So here she is. You'll like their trivia question, who was the first Bond girl? And the more common answer is Ursula Andress, because she was in the first James Bond motion picture film. However, Linda was in the television production that was made in England several years before. So technically it's her. And you can see here Casino Royale. Here's her name up here with Barry Nelson. Not sure if you've seen this one before. It came out a few years before Dr. No, and then here she is on the set. Rivera met her in Acapulco. She was not famous at that point in time. She was just starting out in her career. She ends up actually meeting Errol Flynn, and they end up falling in love and having a relationship. And Flynn brings her to Hollywood, and her career kind of progresses from there. He actually was involved in changing her name to Linda. So when Rivera ends up doing this portrait of her, she's not a famous actress just yet. And this image created some issues because he painted her nude. And when her mom saw this portrait, she was horrified that her daughter was in a nude portrait. And so there was some debate going back and forth. And remember, Rivera's the guy who would not change his painting for Rockefeller at the big commission he had. So Linda's mom was basically pleading with him that, hey, this is not good, this is scandalous and might not be good for my daughter's career, et cetera, et cetera. So Rivera actually did compromise, and he did actually later add this lace blouse to kind of cover her up a little bit. But eventually this was a nude. It kind of, some people wonder, it kind of looks like maybe like Eve in the Garden of Eden, but that's open to your own and personal interpretation. And the detail of the fingernail polish and the lace and even the little bow here. And then some people kind of comment on the hummingbirds and how they're almost touching as they're getting close to one another, and what that might represent. Wink, wink. And so he ends up just meeting these beautiful women and either ask them to pose for him, or they ask him to do their portraits, or some kind of combination thereof. And then you can see the results. Here is another famous actress that he painted, this time a couple of times. And this is Maria Felix. And she's not necessarily a household name in the United States. She's one of the great famous actresses of the golden era of Mexican cinema. If you like old movies, you should check out some of these actresses and these old films from the 40s and 50s. So here's a couple pictures of her in real life. She was considered not only a great talented artist, but one of the most beautiful women in Mexico when she was alive, and even since then, of course. Maybe kind of sort of not really like Marilyn Monroe, kind of like that person. It was a very prolific actress, and but also very beautiful. So Rivera does this portrait of her in 1948, and look at how glamorous she looks in this portrait, and the beautiful colors. So Maria Felix was a Mexican actress and singer. She was one of the most successful figures of Latin American cinema in the 1940s and 1950s, and considered one of the most beautiful actresses of the golden age of Mexican cinema. You might not have heard of her if you're in the United States. She actually was invited to come to Hollywood and participate in films here, but they were either bit roles or they were like stereotypical type roles. And she's like, why would I want to do that? I'm a big star in Mexico, playing the lead actress or lead actor in these films. Why would I kind of come to Hollywood and be some bit character stereotype part? So she actually turned down opportunities to be in films in Hollywood. And she was known for her long, dark, flowing hair, among other things, which Rivera captured. And then here is another painting of her. Again, notice the shoes he's including. And then this one, she has a very kind of revealing lace dress. There she is in real life. Oh yeah, some people are commenting she looks like Jane Russell. Here's Rivera working on her. And again, look at the size of these portraits. Most of these portraits I'm showing you are life size. They're really large scale that he's doing at this point in time. And gosh, how would you like to have your portrait done where you end up coming out looking like this? I mean, wow, how spectacular. And again, very different from a photographic portrait. So Rivera kind of continuing on the tradition of artwork in the early modern era. Here is another one. It's a horizontal one. from 1953. You can see now we're getting kind of towards the end of his life. He passed away in 1957. This is done in 1953. And look at those beautiful colors. Some of these images I don't have high resolution photos of because they're in private collections. Most major museums, you can get access to high resolution images of the artwork, but these ones that are owned by private collections, kind of hit or miss. So this one, I wish I had a little bit better detailed of a photo. But that being said, you can see how spectacular. I mean, look at the yellow color. I mean, I'm thinking Vincent van Gogh would love this painting. And then she's got her daughter here in the background. That's a nice touch. And the flowers and that kind of casual horizontal pose. And then again, look at the shoes. He doesn't overlook that detail. And then the fruit here, it's also a nice touch. And we're into the home stretch of our program, so we're gonna be wrapping up soon. This is Dolores Olmedo. He met her when she was a young woman, and she ended up becoming a very successful businesswoman. And so then she ended up collecting a lot of his artwork, a lot of Frida's artwork, and now there's a museum in Mexico that houses her collection. So the Dolores Olmedo Museum in Mexico City. But interestingly enough, Rivera met her when she was very young, and then they were lifelong friends. And here he is working on her portrait. And this is at the same museum. And this is from 1956. So this is the year before Rivera died in 1957. And so the woman in the previous painting, this is her daughter. And then this is her daughter's friend, and they were living in Acapulco. Look at this beautiful seascape or landscape in the background of Acapulco Bay and the water and the ocean off in the distance. And then you have the two young girls here. So they were in school. I think they were like seniors in high school, and they were supposed to be studying, but they ended up just kind of relaxing. You can see the book here that the daughter's friend has placed on the ground, and just really amazing with the colors. And he's even captured the red of her toenails and then these bright, vivid colors on their clothing and the hairband and the hammock. So, it's really kind of like a tour de force. We've seen all these, let me go back. We've seen all these other horizontal portraits of single solitary figures. But then in this one, he like puts it all together. So just really an amazing painting. It's one of his last works that he did before he died. He actually was passing through this area and got really sick. And so Dolores invited him to stay at her house to kind of recuperate. And so he was doing that. And then while he was still working a little bit. So he ends up making this painting, but it's one of his last major works that he did before he died, and really incredible. It just kind of it really just kind of summarizes so many different things that he did during his career, the depictions of the women and the beautiful colors and the simplified forms and the Mexican heritage and culture with Acapulco in the background. Oh yeah, MC says neon colors in 1956. Amazing. Oh, and there was a question about did Diego Rivera do portraits of Frida Kahlo? He did. I didn't really want to focus too much on Frida Kahlo because we have another whole separate program on her. So I purposely didn't spend as much time talking about his portraits of her because I wanted to kind of focus on other things. But again, look at this. She looks like a Hollywood starlet in this depiction. And then here's his friend's daughter. And she's got the beautiful smile on her face. And you can see the palms in the background, the hammock. So really amazing. So there's the three vertical, or the 5 vertical ones we saw and the 3 horizontal. So we're in the home stretch of our program. I just have a few more things to go over, then we'll wrap it up. But before we do that, why don't we take another break and kind of see what people think about these paintings, if there's anything kind of pops out at people you're looking at these. So let us know in the chat or the Q&A what you think. We'll check in with folks. Patty, anything pop out for your perspective on these works?
Well, I would definitely say the feet are very different. And I think that's because of the subject matter, because during the earlier part, a lot of people seemed uncomfortable with the way the feet were being depicted in the more folk art. And so I think he was a massively talented man in so many ways. And I have a feeling he enjoyed using that talent in as many ways as he could. Well, it comes through kind of in the vivre of the various types of painting. And one thing I really noticed with the women, out of all of the things he could or could not have emphasized, every single one of these women has a huge emphasis on the eyes, and yet not in the way that the living models emphasize their own eyes, or as women tend to do with makeup. There's not a trace of makeup visible in any of these portraits, and yet the eyes are so hugely emphasized.
Oh, I see. No, that is a good point. I never thought about that. I also really liked your comparison and contrast with the feet. I should have included we just have to use our memory, but yeah, I should have included a image, one of the earlier works where they had the feet portrayed. But yeah, the eyes are interesting. I hadn't thought about that either.
Yeah, see, like in you can see the layers of makeup, and I don't mean to be, I'm not critical, but I'm saying you can see that makeup is very studiously applied on the photographs, in the photographs of the women. He takes that emphasis on the eyes, which women do. I mean, traditionally, it goes back to Cleopatra, right? But yet he makes the eyes central in a wholly different way.
Yeah, and this one, I actually wonder if her eyes are a little bit bigger in the painting than they are in real life, because they're a little bit more pronounced. I mean, not a lot where it's obvious, but just a slight amount. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, that was my sense when I first saw it. And then, is she one of the ones that you showed the actual picture of?
Yeah, it was right. Yeah, this her
Okay,
photo.
now look in the photo. Look at how definite the eye makeup is in the one on the left. You can see the same effect, and yet he manages, and this is a point you make all the time, right? Why didn't photography replace painting? Because you can do different things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing several people have noticed about the hair, and looking at these paintings, it always makes me think of the portrait that Frida did of her haircutting episode, and the inscription she included on that. Well, remember the inscription? Yeah.
Yeah, so if you don't know the story, when one of the challenges that Frida and Diego had in their marriage was when he had an affair with her sister. And one of the things he used to tell Frida that he loved about her was her long, dark, luscious hair. And so when she dumped him temporarily, she cut off her hair, her long hair, and made it really, really short. And these women, for the most part, have long hair, which was, kind of the style back then. But yeah, the hair has a little bit maybe more emphasis than you would expect from
Yeah, he volumizes it a great deal.
Volumizes it. That's a good word to put it. Thank you.
Women would know that term. No, but yeah.
Yeah, like look at the hair here. Like, okay, yeah, she has long hair, but your eyes don't really focus on that so much. And then, again, she has long hair here.
But look at how much more dramatic it is in the painting when you get there.
Yeah.
That is fabulous hair in that painting.
Mm-hmm.
And not that there's anything wrong with her hair or her eyes or anything else. It's just you can sort of sense his involvement, and I don't mean involvement in any way other than the craft, but you can sense his involvement with what he's seeing and what he's conveying in the paint.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then again, it's kind of funny, just the the symbolism with the hummingbird, and is she in the Garden of Eve? And maybe she is, maybe she is. I mean, he doesn't explicitly say that, but again, people look at things and see whatever they want to see.
Now you could make looking up at the upper right, you could make an argument that there might be a hint of makeup there, but nowhere near the amount that the actual Hollywood photographs are showing. He just has this way of seeing these people. He sees them in many dimensions, and which is kind of true of his paintings, right? I mean, he could do so many different kinds of paintings so well.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to mention that, so thank you. Yeah, he's got, in my opinion, he's got a pretty broad range. I mean, we've seen a lot of different types of artwork, from the early paintings he did in Mexico to the cubism to the Mexican history and culture and the flowers and the murals and, now these. So yeah, he's got a pretty broad range of talent here.
And I would say among our audience, and it probably differs, from who we have from program to program, but there are a lot of more emotionally involved comments, or that I feel that are emotionally involved, or he inspires a lot. And it's not really what's it supposed to mean. It's more like noticing the aspects of the painting. And I have a feeling that if he were alive and reading this, he'd be going, yes. Keep wondering. I don't know. I never knew the man, but I have a feeling that there was a joie de vivre in him that is kind of indefinable.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Like I said at the beginning, I really wanted to do this program because, like, I think the three things that people most know about Diego Rivera: he was a Mexican artist, he was married to Frida Kahlo, and he cheated on her. And they don't really know much about the how talented he was, and his impact on modern art. He really inspires a lot of artists, not just in Mexico. With the mural projects and the flowers and the women and kind of the embracing history and culture, et cetera, et cetera. So I was hoping people get maybe kind of like a new perspective on this very talented artist.
And yeah, based on the number of commissions he had in his lifetime, I mean, I would say he had that effect on the world at large in his lifetime as well. I don't think it's just something we're seeing. I think this is a timeless quality of him.
Yeah, that's a good point also. Yeah, the paintings are very timeless. Sometimes when you go back and look at old painting, like, oh, maybe they hold up well, but sometimes not always. And yeah, these are, in my opinion, very timeless as well. I mean, look at the beauty of this portrait here of his friend Dolores.
Yeah, I just, there is just something exciting. Somebody commented that, did he actually wear a suit to paint? All of my mental images of him tend to be in a kind of that sort of an outfit right there. I don't know if you actually call it a suit, but yeah, that he usually looks more dressed than undressed. I don't remember seeing him in a smock. I've seen him in coveralls, but not in an artist smock or anything like that. He's a big man.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I think maybe it might depend on kind of the situation. But yeah, he did wear the smock. Because if you get the paint on your clothes, that's pretty much the end of the story.
Right, but he wore coveralls a lot, didn't he?
Oh yeah, yeah, that was one of his favorite things to wear.
Yeah. Kim is saying he's painting Breck hair. Does anybody remember? If anybody remembers those commercials, the Breck girls?
Yeah, I mean, that could be like a hair shampoo advertisement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the Brett girls. I remember that. That's funny. That's again why it's interesting to look at art with other people. You kind of get these different perspectives.
But yeah, it's really nice. I mean, so many. Yeah, Howard definitely says he remembers the Brett girls. There's just that set. I can't really convey it any better, but the sense of emotional involvement, genuine emotional involvement that's coming through in the Q&A and in the chat. I think that Rivera would have been very proud of himself, saying, yes, that's what I was after. Keep looking, it's just very interesting. And it's not that way. Remember, we've talked about that. Some certain artists that you've done, people want to do this analysis sort of thing rather than just letting themselves fall into the painting. And this one, it just seems extremely genuine, extremely present, I should say.
Yeah, one of the things that's kind of hard to convey is he was a very charismatic, popular, friendly guy. I mean, one of the reasons why he does these portraits is women would seek him out. I mean, they're like, "Oh, wow, I saw other work that you did. Could you do my portrait?" And just very well known and popular during his lifetime. So he ends up meeting all different. He ends up meeting a lot of very influential men like Trotsky and stuff like that. We didn't really have time to go into that stuff, but I mean, he's just really. We don't really have. It's hard to convey his kind of personality, I guess, in just looking at his paintings. But yeah, very kind of gregarious, life of the party, popular, et cetera, et cetera. So
Defies convention, yes.
so we're getting the home stretch for Washington, D.C. History and Culture. We're a nonprofit community organization. All of the programs we offer are usually free. If you ever want to support the work we do to continue keeping our programs free, we accept donations by PayPal, Venmo, or GoFundMe. If you've ever made a donation in the past, thank you very much. Your support is greatly appreciated. We couldn't continue to do these programs without the support from the community. It's because we had to pay for our Zoom bill and our meetup websites and our Eventbrite email system, et cetera, et cetera. This information is also in the event description and was included at the Zoom stuff. And okay, let's wrap things up and talk just a few more minutes about Diego and his relationship with Frida, which again, it's interesting just because like, oh God, Diego Rivera, he was terrible. He cheated on her. What a, bad guy. And I'm not saying I agree with him, but it was just a very interesting marriage. And, who knows what's going on behind the scenes. But in my opinion, there was a lot of passion and love in this relationship. I mean, they were together for 25 years and you see all these different images of them in some kind of physical embrace, whether it's kissing or hugging or looking at one another very lovingly. So kind of keep that in mind. And again, these like this photo over here, they're not newlyweds when this picture was taken. They had been together for a number of years. And I'll show you a couple of short videos in just a minute. You can see that as well. Frida liked to, she was a big romantic. And so one of the things she liked to do is she liked to put her lipstick imprint on a photo or a letter and either send it to him if they were apart or hold on to it if they were together. And so the infidelity was the issue. They both had affairs, although I believe he much more so than her. And it caused a big problem when, excuse me, when he ended up having an affair with Frida's sister. And so she actually was enraged. And so she dumped him and they actually got divorced. But then about a year later, I think it was actually more like 11 months, they actually got back together and remarried a second time. And so this is them together when he's signing the marital paperwork and she's kind of keeping tabs on it to make sure he signs in the right spot. And then again, you just see all kinds of images like this. So this, again, just kind of maybe change your perspective a little bit on their relationship. They were not newlyweds when this photo was taken. They had been together for many years. And you see all kinds of images. Like if you don't believe me, just Google Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera photos, and you'll just see countless examples like this. Again, here's another one. So again, I'm not defending either one of them or saying their marriage was perfect, but who really knows what was going on between the two of them? I think kind of their marriage kind of reminds me of Vincent van Gogh's mental health stuff. People just gravitate towards that and focus on it and look at everything through that kind of prism, as opposed to just kind of being aware of it or cognizant, but maybe kind of putting it off to the side. So anyways, I said before, Diego Rivera, born in 1886, he died in 1957. He was 21 years older than Frida. She was born in 1907. She had a number of health issues. She passed away in 1954. The title of this program, just FYI, it was called Diego Rivera and Mexican Modernism. We didn't really talk a lot about Frida Kahlo on purpose because the program wasn't called Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo. So there might be someone kind of upset that we didn't spend as much time talking to her, but the focus of the program was Rivera. And we have a whole separate program we do on Frida. So if you want to learn more about her, you can come join us for that someday. And then here's when she passed away. And he ended up doing this tribute work of her. He did a number of images of her, but again, just to kind of keep the focus on him, I purposely excluded many of those, although I show them in the other program to a certain degree. And there's a couple of short home movies of Diego and Frida that I wanted to play for you. The video quality is not the greatest because these were made in the 1950s and home movie technology wasn't anywhere where it is today, but it does kind of give you some insight of their home life. So thanks for joining us. Let me cue this up again, 2 short videos, and then once we're done with that, that's the end of our program. So here is short home movie number 1. This one's not narrated. It's unfortunate there's no sound with it, but that's the way it was in the 1950s. Oh, if only you could hear what she's saying. There's no known recordings, unfortunately, of Frida Kahlo's voice. There was one that appeared a few years ago, but it was later dismissed as not being her. So that's unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, look at this. Look at this image of the two of them embracing one another. There's Trotsky. Is Frida looking through a book that she made? Look at her jewelry that she's wearing. Okay, so that was movie 1 of 2. Just as FYI, later on tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern, we have a program featuring Edward Hopper and the American Experience. It takes place at 8 o'clock Washington, D.C., or 8 o'clock New York City time. I posted the Zoom link in the chat. You're welcome to come join us if you want. And then also, if you haven't signed up, you can do so via Eventbrite or Meetup. If you haven't signed up, don't worry, you can just use the Zoom link that I posted in the chat. So this is the last thing we're going to take a look at for today. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for Patty, as always, for being here. And thanks for all your interesting comments that all of you had. Greatly appreciate that. And let's watch Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, home movie number 2. And when this concludes, that'll be the end of our program for today. So thanks, everyone. This one has some beautiful music accompanying it. And again, notice the interaction between Frida and Diego, which this is taken in the 1950s, a few years before the two of them died. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your weekend. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.